My name is Renee Caldwell. I was 38 years old when my husband of 11 years threw a party to celebrate divorcing me and invited every person we knew to watch. He strung lights in the backyard. He catered the food. He brought her there on his arm like a trophy he'd finally earned. Then he gave a speech about courage and new beginnings, while I stood at the edge of that yard holding a glass of sparkling water, and every person in that crowd waited for me to fall apart. What Damon didn't know was that I had already been inside his locked office drawer. I had already photographed the documents. I had already made the call. He looked at me that night like I was already finished, like 11 years of my life, my income, my signature, forged on papers I never touched, had already been quietly buried. He had no idea I'd been keeping records for 6 years. Let me tell you how I got here. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. I noticed the cologne first. It wasn't the kind of thing you could name right away. Just a shift in the air, something sharper than what I was used to, something that didn't belong to the man I'd been sleeping beside for 11 years. Damon moved through the kitchen that Tuesday morning like the house was already a memory. Easy, almost light. He poured his coffee, checked his phone twice, and didn't once look up to see if I was watching. I was watching. That's the thing about being the quiet one in a marriage. People forget you have eyes. I stood at the sink with my own coffee going cold, going through the list in my head the way I always did. What needed to be submitted to the church board by Friday, which accounts had to be reconciled before the weekend, whether I'd remembered to pull the electric bill. I manage the administrative accounts for our congregation, have for 7 years. Numbers don't lie to me. Patterns don't hide from me. And what I was seeing in Damon that morning was a pattern I'd been logging for months without letting myself name it. The garage phone calls started in February, always after 9, always with the door pulled shut. The arguments stopped somewhere around March. Not because we resolved anything, because he stopped needing to win. The new clients he mentioned, vaguely, always vaguely, who kept him late on Thursdays. You know what nobody tells you about a man who's already made a decision? He gets peaceful. The fight leaves him because the fight is already over in his mind. He's done the math. He's just waiting on the paperwork. I rinsed my mug and set it in the rack. I did not say anything about the cologne. I remembered, for just a second, the two of us bent over our old kitchen table, the wobbly one we kept meaning to fix, laughing at a typo on his first business card print run at midnight, him saying I was the only reason any of it was working. The room had smelled like copy toner and cold takeout. We were so young we thought exhausted meant happy. I filed the memory away and went to work. Let me tell you something about 11 years of quiet investment. I picked up double shifts at the church office while Damon chased his first commercial listing. I filed his quarterly business taxes on my lunch breaks, every quarter, every year, for a decade. I was the one who tracked which contractor needed to be paid, which LLC renewal was coming due, which property needed its inspection report before closing. I did it because I loved him, and because I was good at it, and because nobody else was going to. He got the credit. I got the receipts. I was fine with that, until I wasn't. 3 days later, I came home to a manila envelope on the kitchen counter. No note, no conversation, no Renee, we need to talk. Just the envelope, centered like he'd placed it deliberately, and my full legal name typed on the tab. My jaw locked. I set my bag down. I picked up the envelope. I stood right there at the counter and read every single page. Twice, slowly, the way my mother taught me to read anything that carries your name. Dissolution of marriage, asset division proposals, his attorney's contact information in the header, 11 years reduced to numbered paragraphs and signature lines. I set the papers down exactly where I found them. Then I went to the refrigerator and started making dinner. I am not going to tell you I wasn't hurt. I was. But hurt wasn't what was loudest in me right then. What was loudest was something quieter and colder, a kind of recognition. Like when you've been tracking a storm on the radar for so long that when it finally arrives, you're not surprised. You're just watching it confirm what you already knew. I was not panicking. I was pattern matching. The asset division he proposed was almost insultingly clean. Too clean. Numbers that resolved too neatly for a man whose finances I knew were considerably more complicated than what appeared in these pages. Properties I remembered. Properties I didn't. An income figure that made me set down the knife I was holding and pick up the papers one more time. Something was missing. Several somethings. I finished cooking. I put a plate in the oven for warmth, covered it with foil, and sat down at the kitchen table with the papers spread in front of me. I went through them one more time, slower. I made 3 small pencil marks in the margin, the kind of marks that mean, come back here. Then I picked up my phone. I dialed. It rang twice, and I waited for someone to answer. I was up before 4, not because I couldn't sleep. I slept fine, which surprised me. What woke me was the same thing that always woke me when something needed to be handled, a quiet, insistent alertness, like a door nudging open in my chest. Pay attention. It's time. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. I put the envelope in front of me and left it closed. I wasn't going to read it again. I'd already read it. What I needed now wasn't more information from those pages. What I needed was to find out what those pages were designed to make me miss. There's a difference. A big one. Damon was a planner. I knew that about him better than anyone. He didn't do anything in one move if he could set up 3. It was what made him good at real estate, the way he could see a property not as it was, but as what it could become after the right sequence of decisions. I'd always admired it. Sitting there in the dark with my coffee, I understood for the first time that he'd been applying that same thinking to me, to us, to everything we'd built. The question wasn't whether the divorce papers were the whole story. I already knew they weren't. The question was how deep the architecture went. I knew where to look. Damon had a locked drawer in his home office, bottom left, the kind with a small brass lock that most people wouldn't bother with, the kind that signals nothing important here by pretending to be an afterthought. He kept it locked for the 7 years we'd lived in this house, and he never once mentioned it, which told me everything I needed to know about what was inside it. What he didn't know, what he'd never thought to find out, was that I had the key. I'd found it 4 years ago in the lining of a jacket I was sending out to be dry cleaned, a small brass key on a plain ring. Damon never asked about it. He probably forgot he'd ever had it. I held it in my palm for a long moment. Then I slipped it into the back of my jewelry box and left it there. I'd always hoped I'd never need it. I am not proud of the fact that some part of me always suspected I would. I got up, padded down the hall in the dark, and opened the door to his office. You know what I didn't feel, walking in there? Guilty. Not even a little. That told me something about where I'd already arrived without admitting it to myself. I unlocked the drawer. The first thing I pulled out was a stapled packet, Articles of Organization for a Limited Liability Company. 3 years old, filed in a state we'd never lived in. The company name meant nothing to me, but the address on the registered agent line made me go very still. I set that packet aside and kept going. Refinancing agreements, 3 of them. Properties I recognized, addresses I knew, deals I remembered Damon closing, assets that existed in both our names. The refinancing paperwork listed me as a co-signatory on each one. I never signed any of them. My hands went still. I held the first signature page up toward the window where the earliest gray light was just starting to show. My name. My handwriting. Almost. Close enough to pass a quick glance. Not close enough to pass a forensic one. I checked the second packet. Same thing. Third. Same. Someone had signed my name to documents I'd never seen. 3 times. On agreements that had restructured the financing on properties we jointly owned. and all 3 bore notary stamps that I didn't recognize, from an office I'd never set foot in. I pulled out my phone and started photographing. Every page, every signature line, every stamp, every date, every identifying number in the headers. I worked slowly, and I worked completely. I did not rush. At the bottom of the drawer, underneath the refinancing packets, I found the LLC paperwork again, a fuller version this time, with the registered agent information on a separate sheet. The name on that line meant nothing to me. I wrote it down anyway. Then I closed the drawer. I locked it. I walked back down the hall, replaced the key in my jewelry box, and sat down at the kitchen table with my now cold coffee and a feeling in my chest that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief. It was something more like arrival, like I had finally walked far enough into the dark to see exactly what was in it. I picked up my phone and called Philip Okafor, a family friend who'd become a divorce attorney after his own brutal split a decade back. He picked up on the 3rd ring. I told him I'd found something. He asked if I'd signed the divorce papers. "No," I said. "Good." His voice was already focused, already working. "Don't touch a thing. Come see me tomorrow." I hung up. Then I reached under the kitchen table, to the flat, taped envelope I'd fixed to the underside of the tabletop 6 years ago, and I peeled it free. Inside was a notebook, careful handwriting, dates going back to the beginning, every account, every contribution, every decision made in both our names. I set it beside my coffee, and I opened it to the first page. A week after finding those documents, a sealed envelope arrived at my front door by hand delivery. No postal mark. Damon's attorney's return address in the corner, embossed and tidy. I stood in the doorway and opened it. The card inside was thick cream stock, printed in a clean serif font. A celebration of new beginnings. Below that, in smaller text, both our names, listed together as guests of honor, like we were retiring from a job we'd both chosen to leave. My hands went still. I read it twice. Then I went inside and called my younger sister Kezia, who has been my closest confidant since we were girls sharing a bedroom and one working lamp. I read her the whole thing out loud, every word. She was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "He wants an audience," she said. "He wants to stand up in front of everybody y'all know and watch you fall apart. He wants witnesses, Renee." I already knew that, but hearing Kezia say it out loud made the shape of it clearer, the specific cruelty of it, the theater. Damon had always understood that reputation was its own kind of currency. He wasn't just ending the marriage, he was managing the story of how it ended. And he needed people present to receive that story while he still controlled the telling. "I'm going," I said. Kezia made a sound that was half laugh, half something far less polite. "You have lost your mind." "Maybe," I said. "I'll let you know." The following afternoon, I sat across from Philip Okafor in his office and laid everything out. The photographs I'd taken, the LLC articles, the refinancing packets with my forged name on every signature line. I put my notebook on the desk beside the printouts. Philip is a precise man. He doesn't perform concern. He just works. He went through each photograph methodically, and when he finished, he set his pen down flat on the desk. "These signatures aren't yours," he said. It wasn't a question. "No." "And you never had any knowledge of this LLC, these refinancing agreements, or the registered agent?" "None." He nodded, slow, deliberate. "Then what we have here is a fraudulent restructuring of marital assets using forged documentation. That's not just aggressive divorce strategy, Renee. That's criminal exposure." He tapped the page with the registered agent line. "This name, Nadine. You don't know her?" "I didn't," I said, "until I did." I told him about the invitation, about the party, about the name on Damon's arm I was about to put a face to. Philip leaned back. He thought for a moment the way he always did, not performing thinking, actually doing it. Then, "Go to the party." That's what I told my sister. "Don't say anything inflammatory. Don't confront him, don't confront her, and do not sign a single thing anyone hands you. I don't care if it's a birthday card." He looked at me directly. "I need Damon comfortable. A comfortable man keeps making the same mistakes." I told him I understood. "Come see me the morning after," he said. "And Renee," he paused, "pay attention to everything." Like I needed to be told. I bought a new dress 2 days before the party. Deep burgundy. Simple cut, nothing theatrical. I didn't buy it to perform anything. I bought it because I refused to walk into that backyard in something Damon had already seen. You know what I thought about on the drive over? The first open house Damon ever hosted. A cramped little Tudor in a neighborhood that hadn't turned yet. I'd ironed his shirt that morning and made him eat something before he left because he always forgot to when he was nervous. He'd called me from the car afterward, practically vibrating, because he'd gotten 2 offers. "You're my good luck," he'd said. I remember the warmth of that. I remember believing it. I let that memory sit for exactly the length of 1 red light. Then I drove the rest of the way in quiet. The backyard was exactly what I expected. Edison lights strung between posts, catered trays, soft music from a speaker I recognized. We'd bought it together 2 Christmases ago. 40-something people arranged in clusters, holding drinks, carrying the specific energy of a crowd that knows something is about to happen. Then Nadine arrived on Damon's arm. Late 20s, a dress that fit like it was made for her and probably cost close to it. She laughed at something Damon said before he even finished saying it, the practiced laugh of a woman who has learned which moments call for it. Damon gave a speech. Growth, honesty, the courage it takes to begin again. His voice was warm and unhurried, the voice of a man who had already won. He did not look at me once. Every person in that backyard glanced my way at least twice. They were waiting. I gave them nothing. I stood at the edge of the yard with a glass of sparkling water and a pleasant expression, and I stayed exactly 1 hour. On my way out, I stopped at Damon's elbow. "Enjoy tonight," I said, quiet enough that only he heard it. He laughed, the easy laugh of a man who thinks he's watching someone concede. I walked to my car, and as I passed Nadine's car in the driveway, without slowing, without pausing, I raised my phone and took a photograph of the license plate. Personalized plates, a combination I recognized. I had seen those plates before, parked outside a property address, one I knew from the refinancing documents in Damon's drawer. The morning after the party, I was in Philip's office by 8:15. I slid the photograph across his desk first. Nadine's license plate, sharp and clear. Then the property record I'd pulled from my files the night before. The address I recognized, printed on a refinancing packet bearing my forged name. Philip looked at both documents for a long moment. He didn't reach for his pen. He didn't say anything right away. He just looked. The way a man looks when he's confirming something he already suspected. Then he said, "She was at the property." "Her car was," I said, "more than once." He set the photograph down and folded his hands. "Renee, I need to walk you through what I've put together since you were last in this office. All of it. And I need you to hear it without reacting." I told him I was listening. He started 3 years back. That was when it began. Not a sudden decision, but a construction. Slow, deliberate, built in layers. Damon had formed the LLC quietly, in a state we had no ties to, using a registered agent no one in our immediate life would recognize. Income from properties we jointly owned began routing through that LLC. Not all at once, gradually, the way you move furniture when you don't want anyone to notice the room is being rearranged. The refinancing agreements were the sharper edge of it. 2 properties, both jointly held, both refinanced with documentation that carried my signature on every line that required one. "You signed none of these," Philip said. "I've never seen those pages before in my life." He nodded. The signatures are consistent enough to suggest someone who had access to your actual handwriting, existing documents, checks, prior contracts. They didn't guess at your signature. They studied it. My jaw locked. I thought about every document I'd ever signed in that house. Tax filings, bank cards, the original mortgage. 11 years of paper with my name on it, sitting in filing cabinets we both could reach. You know what that feels like? Not just betrayal. It feels like someone walked through every room you built together and measured the exits before you knew they were leaving. What does the LLC structure mean for what I'm owed? I asked. It means income that should have been marital property was systematically redirected before it could be counted in the asset pool. Philip leaned forward. Renee, if this had gone to a standard divorce settlement without forensic review, you would have received a fraction of what you're actually entitled to. The numbers he'd have handed his attorney would have reflected the restructured picture, not the real one. I set my hands flat on my knees, quiet and still. And Nadine. Philip picked up the registered agent page and turned it so I could read the line I already knew by heart. She signed this, he said, establishing herself as the legal registered agent for a structure designed to redirect your marital assets. Whether she understood the full scope of what she was participating in, her name is on this document. That carries legal weight. I absorbed that without moving. Nadine in that backyard, the dress, the practiced laugh, the comfortable way she stood on Damon's arm in front of every person we knew, not as a secret, but as a statement. And all the while, her name was on paperwork that had been working against me for 3 years. Philip filed the forensic accounting request with the court that same morning. The forged signatures were formally flagged. He told me an investigator would be assigned, that the process would take time, and that time was something I needed to let work in my favor. Then he told me what my job was. Every mediation session, every communication through attorneys, every room you share with Damon's people. You are cooperative, pleasant, and visibly uninformed. He held my gaze. He has to believe you don't know what you know. The moment he thinks you're a threat, he adjusts, and an adjusted Damon is harder to catch. I understood exactly what he was asking. He was asking me to perform the role Damon had already cast me in, the quiet, manageable wife who wouldn't see the whole board. The difference was I'd be choosing it this time. How long? I asked. Until the forensic findings are solid enough that he has no room to maneuver. Philip closed the folder. Fraud cases live and die on documentation. Yours is unusually strong. Let's not give him a reason to start covering his tracks more carefully. I told him I could do it. Because I could. I had been patient for 6 years without even knowing I was being patient. A few more weeks of pleasant and cooperative was nothing. Philip started gathering the file. Then he stopped. He looked at me the way he did when he was asking something that mattered more than it sounded. Has anyone close to you ever felt something was off about how he ran his business? I didn't have to think long. 3 seconds, maybe. Kezia, I said. That same afternoon, I was at Kezia's kitchen table by 2 o'clock. I didn't call ahead, I just drove. Kezia, my younger sister, and the one person who had always sensed Damon was running a longer game than anyone admitted, opened the door and looked at my face and stood aside without a word. I spread everything across her table. LLC formation documents, the refinancing packets, the signature pages with my name on lines I never touched, Nadine's name on the registered agent line, clean and deliberate as a signature on a check. Kezia stood over the table and read. She didn't rush it. She went page by page, and her jaw tightened in a way I recognized from the girls we used to be. From every time we were young and something unfair landed in front of us, and we had to decide what to do with it. Finally, she said, I need to get my phone. She came back with it already unlocked, already scrolling. 2 years. That's how long she'd worked at Damon's office before he let her go. Budget cuts, he'd said, with that particular smile. The smile he used when the real reason was something he'd rather not name out loud. Let me tell you something about a woman who keeps her text messages. Kezia had saved everything. Not because she knew what she had, because our mother raised us both to document, and some habits live in the bone. She set the phone on the table and pointed. The first message was from a colleague at the office, a woman Kezia had been friendly with during those 2 years. The message referenced a wire transfer, a specific amount, sent to an account Kezia didn't recognize. Kezia had been asked to process it with minimal paperwork. When she asked for documentation, the request was quietly handed to someone else. She'd flagged it mentally and filed it away. "I thought it was just sloppy back-office work," Kezia said. "I didn't know what I was looking at." She scrolled further. Another message, same colleague, dated about a month after Kezia's dismissal. Vague, careful language, but there was a reference, just once, just briefly, to Damon handling something personal, to a woman who'd been around the office and then wasn't anymore. The colleague called it a situation that got resolved. I looked up from the phone. "There was someone before Nadine," I said. Kezia sat down across from me. "The timeline fits. That wire transfer, I looked up the amount later, just trying to make sense of it. It was significant, Renee. Not office budget money." I knew exactly what she was about to say, but I needed to hear her say it. "That money," I said. "Where do you think it came from?" Her expression told me before she answered. Where did all his money come from back then? From me. From my double shifts. From my lunch break tax filings and the overtime I picked up the winter his first commercial deal fell through, and we needed the margin. From 11 years of decisions I made quietly so he could move forward loudly. I still remember the particular smell of that church office in those years. Old carpet and ink toner, a space heater clicking on every morning. I used to pack my lunch to save the $12 so we could keep the business account padded. I thought we were building something together. He used that $12 to buy himself a clean exit from a mess he made. My hands went still on the table. "Did Nadine know about her?" I asked. Kezia was quiet for a moment, just long enough. "I don't know for certain," she said, but she looked at me when she said it in a way that meant she suspected the answer was yes. Some things you can tell from 11 years of reading your sister's face. She wasn't giving me certainty, but she wasn't giving me comfort either. She was giving me the honest version. I gathered the pages back into order. I was methodical about it, same as I'd been all morning. Stack, align, paperclip. Each page representing something he thought was buried. None of it was buried. It was just waiting. Kezia walked me to the door. She held it open and said, "What are you going to do?" "What Philip told me to do," I said. "Nothing, for now." She didn't love that answer. She never loved the slow play. But she nodded, because she trusted me even when she disagreed with me, and that trust is not a small thing. I was 20 minutes from home when the call came. Unknown number. I almost let it go. Something made me answer. The voice on the other end was a woman's, measured, careful, like someone who had rehearsed the first sentence a few times before dialing. "I think we should talk," she said. "I believe my name might mean something to you." I pulled over to the curb, put the car in park. My throat tightened. Just once, just for a second. I didn't speak. I held the phone, and I listened. The morning after Kezia's, I called Philip before 7. I told him about the call, the woman's voice, the careful sentences, the way she'd said my name might mean something to you, like she'd been building up to it for a long time. Philip listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "Meet her," he said, "somewhere neutral and public. Bring nothing with you, no files, no photographs. Let her talk first, all the way through. Don't fill the silences. And if she wants something from me? Let her ask, then call me before you agree to anything." I said I understood. He said he knew I did. 3 weeks is a long time to perform. That's what those mediation sessions were, a performance, carefully calibrated. I arrived each time with a yellow legal pad and a pen I'd had since my first year at the church office. I wore neutral colors. I sat up straight. I asked clarifying questions in a tone that suggested I was still catching up, still processing, still the woman Damon had decided I was. "Could you walk me through that valuation one more time?" I asked in the second session. "I just want to make sure I'm following." Damon's attorney smiled at me with the practiced patience of a man who believed he was dealing with someone manageable. His shoulders stayed loose the whole hour. That looseness was useful information. You know what the hardest part of that performance was? Not the questions, not the pleasant expression. It was the one time I laughed, softly, almost to myself, at something his attorney said about a filing deadline, and watched Damon relax in his chair like he'd just won something. He thought my laugh meant I was comfortable. He had no idea it meant I was done being surprised by him. I signed nothing, not a single page. Meanwhile, Philip's forensic accountant was working through 3 years of financial records the court had compelled Damon to produce. The fraud investigator moved methodically, pulling bank statements, LLC filings, property transaction records. Somewhere on the other side of all that paperwork was the full shape of what Damon had built, and the investigator was tracing every edge of it. Damon had no idea. He was busy with a different project entirely. I heard it secondhand, the way you always hear the things people say about you when they think you're not listening. A colleague from a firm he sometimes partnered with mentioned it to someone at church, who told Kezia, who told me without editorializing. Damon was making the rounds, at dinners, at open houses, in the easy, extended conversations men like him have at the edges of industry events. He was telling people I'd struggled with his success, that I wouldn't know how to manage on my own, that he'd tried but some people just couldn't grow with you. My jaw locked when Kezia told me. Just once. Then I let it go. Nadine was doing her part too. She showed up at his professional events looking like a confirmation of everything he was saying. Young, composed, moving through his world without friction. And she'd talk about me in that particular way, the kind that sounds like sympathy from the outside. Damon says she really struggled. A few careful words dropped in the right rooms, and suddenly I was a footnote with a fragility problem. I added it all to the notebook. Every second-hand report, every event, every room, every name. Documentation is documentation, regardless of how it arrives. It was the 3rd week of discovery when Philip called me on a Tuesday afternoon. His voice had that particular flatness it got when he was controlling something, when the information was significant enough that he was choosing his words the way you choose your steps on wet pavement. "There's another layer," he said. The life insurance policy, the one I had taken out 11 years ago, the one I had funded through payroll deductions every month without interruption, the one that existed because I had been raised by a woman who believed in protecting what you built. Damon had used it as collateral. One of the fraudulent property deals, one of the transactions carrying my forged signature, had been secured in part against that policy. My name appeared on the consent documentation. My signature. Not mine, but carrying my name like it belonged there, pressed onto a page I had never seen. My hands went still. Philip wasn't done. "The notarization stamp on the consent documentation," he said. "The office address on the stamp. We ran it. It's a commercial building. The registered tenant on that floor is the company Nadine works for." I sat at the kitchen table and didn't say anything for a moment. "She wasn't adjacent to this," I finally said. "No," Philip said. "She wasn't." That Thursday evening he called again. "They made a mistake," he said. "The fraud investigator found it. I'm sending you the summary tonight, but I wanted you to hear it from me first." He told me what it was. I don't remember exactly when I sat down. I just know I ended up on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, phone still in my hand. The linoleum was cool through my jeans. The kitchen was quiet. I let myself feel it. All of it. The full weight of what had been constructed, piece by piece, year by year, using my name and my money and my silence. Not because I was breaking, because I was almost finished. 1 week after Philip's call, I walked into a coffee shop on the east side of town, neutral ground. Small place, the kind that stays half empty on weekday mornings. No one from our neighborhood. No one from Damon's professional circle. I got there 10 minutes early and chose a corner table where I could see the door. She came in right on time. I recognized her from nothing. No photograph, no description. I just knew. The way she scanned the room carefully, the way her shoulders carried something she'd been holding a long time. She was maybe a few years younger than me. She looked tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. She sat down across from me and put a manila envelope on the table between us. "I wasn't sure I was going to come," she said. "I know," I said. "Thank you for coming anyway." She opened the envelope herself and slid the contents toward me without me asking. Printed bank records, 3 pages. A transfer amount that made my chest go tight. Not because of the number, but because I knew exactly which deposits had built that account. Double shifts, lunch breaks, 11 years of filling in every gap so Damon's career had room to grow. There was also a letter, handwritten, 2 pages, signed at the bottom. She'd written down what happened, the relationship, the way it ended, the conversation where Damon told her it was a mutual decision and handed her a number. Neat, careful handwriting. She'd been composing that letter in her head for a long time before she put it on paper. You know what I noticed? She didn't look like a woman who wanted anything from me. She just looked like someone who was tired of being the only one who knew. "I always thought there were others," she said quietly. "Before me, after me. He had a particular way of making you feel like you were the exception, like you were the one who finally understood him." My hands went still on the edge of the papers. I remembered the night Damon came home from his first big commercial closing, the way he'd set the check on the counter and said, "We did this, Renee, both of us." And I had believed him completely. That memory sat beside this moment, and I didn't try to reconcile them. "You don't owe me an apology," I said. She looked up. "I just need your signature on one document. My attorney prepared it. It's an affidavit. It formalizes what you've already written in that letter." I slid Philip's paperwork across the table. She read every word. I waited. She signed it. We didn't stay long after that. I thanked her again at the door. She said she hoped it helped. I told her it would. We went our separate ways, and I drove straight to Philip's office. By 3 o'clock that same afternoon, the complete package was filed with the court. Philip walked me through it once, item by item, the forensic accounting findings, the forged signature documentation, the insurance collateral records with the notarization stamp tied to Nadine's employer, and the signed affidavit. Everything cataloged, everything sourced, everything in the right order. Damon's attorney was formally notified. Philip said the man's response was measured, professional, the kind of measured that means someone just realized they've been working with incomplete information and is doing the math on what that means for them. Nadine, separately, received a certified letter that same day, informing her she had been named as a material party in the fraud investigation. Her attorney, the one Damon could no longer cover the bill for, reportedly called her within the hour. The advice was simple and immediate. Cooperate with investigators now, completely, before the window narrowed. She agreed. I won't pretend I felt nothing when Philip told me that. I felt something. Not satisfaction exactly, more like the specific relief of a structure finally holding the weight it was built for. He called me that night at 9:47. I saw Damon's name on the screen and I let it ring twice. Then I answered. "Renee?" His voice was level, controlled. He'd rehearsed the opening. "I need you to understand what you've set in motion here. This isn't... You don't have the full picture of how these things work. People around you are feeding you information, and you're running with it like you understand the implications, and you don't." I said nothing. I let him go. "This is Philip running a strategy and using you to do it. You've always been trusting. That's not a criticism, that's just who you are, but you are being manipulated by someone who sees a payday. And when this is over, you are going to be left holding consequences you didn't see coming. I know you, Renee. I know how you think. You were never equipped to handle something like this." The line went quiet. "I'll see you in court, Damon." I hung up. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before my alarm. I made a full breakfast, eggs, toast, the good coffee I'd started buying for myself 2 months ago. I ate at the kitchen table while the sun came up. Then I went to the closet and took out the dress I'd bought the week after the party. I put it on. The courthouse smelled like central air and old carpet. Philip walked beside me through the front doors, and I noticed he'd worn his good charcoal suit. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. We found our table on the left side of the room. Damon was already seated at the right. He'd worn a navy blazer, fresh haircut. He sat the way he always sat in rooms he thought he owned. Shoulders back, chin level, the particular ease of a man who still believed he was the smartest person present. His attorney leaned over and said something. Damon nodded, unhurried. He glanced at me once when we came in. Then he looked away. Let me tell you something about a man who has underestimated a woman for 11 years. He doesn't even know he's doing it anymore. It's automatic. It's muscle memory. Philip opened his folder. I set my hands flat on the table. The forensic accountant presented first. She was precise and unhurried, the kind of witness whose calm makes a room lean in. She walked the court through the LLC formation, the asset transfers, the refinancing structure Damon had used to redirect income from jointly held properties into accounts Renee had no access to. 3 years of paper. She laid it out in sequence, and it was almost elegant in its thoroughness, the way a thing you built carefully tends to look, right up until someone else explains it to a judge. Then Philip submitted the signature pages. They went up on the screen at the front of the room. My name. My handwriting, or something close enough to fool a notary who wasn't looking carefully. Document after document, 7 pages total, across 3 separate transactions, none of which I had ever been in the room for. Damon's attorney requested a recess. The judge allowed 10 minutes. The room shifted. Philip turned to make a note. The court clerk stepped out. People moved. Damon didn't. He sat at his table and looked at me. Not the polished glance from this morning, something different, something that had lost its rehearsal. I couldn't tell you what he expected to find on my face. Shock, maybe. Or fear. Something that told him he still had a version of this he could manage. I looked back. I didn't smile. I didn't look away. I just held his gaze the same way I had held every mediation session and every phone call, and every morning I woke up and chose precision over panic. With everything I had and nothing to spare. He was the one who looked away. He looked down at the table in front of him, and he kept his eyes there until the recess was over. That was enough. That was, honestly, enough. You know what a comprehensive settlement sounds like when you've been waiting for it. Not dramatic, not triumphant, just a series of clean, declarative sentences from a judge who has reviewed the evidence and is done entertaining ambiguity. The marital home transferred to me. Full ownership, his name removed. Her full share of the LLC assets, all of them, ruled marital property on the basis of the fraud finding, returned. Every dollar that had been quietly redirected over 3 years, accounted for and restored. Compensatory damages for the forged documents. A number I won't repeat here, but a real one. The insurance collateral arrangement dissolved immediately. The policy I had funded, that he had used as a financial lever without my knowledge or consent, was restored to its original standing in my name. And then the last part. Damon referred for criminal investigation on the forgery charges. His real estate license flagged, pending the outcome of that investigation. His attorney wrote notes very quickly. Damon sat still. Philip gathered his folders with the quiet efficiency of a man who had known for 6 weeks how this would end. I was almost to the hallway doors when I heard him behind me. "Renee." I stopped. I turned. Damon stood a few feet away. The blazer looked different now. Not polished, just a jacket. His voice had dropped to something I hadn't heard in a long time, something that didn't have a strategy behind it. "I made mistakes," he said. "I panicked. I want you to know it wasn't supposed to go this far. I didn't plan for it to become what it became." He looked at me the way people look when they need something from you. Acknowledgement, maybe, or absolution, or just the relief of being understood by someone who knew the whole story. I thought about his lunch breaks, mine, not his, the quarterly tax filings I completed between bites of a sandwich at my desk, the night I ironed his shirt for a listing presentation he'd forgotten to tell me about until 10 o'clock, the party, Nadine's arm in his name on my signature. I looked at him. "I know," I said. I turned and walked out. That night I sat in my kitchen. No television, no music. I opened a bottle of sparkling water, poured it into a glass, and sat at the table in the quiet. His name was off the deed. The house held the silence differently now, steadier somehow, like it had been waiting for the right occupant all along. It was the best silence I had ever heard. 6 months after the hearing, I was on my second cup of coffee when Philip called. Saturday morning, 9:15. I'd already been up for 2 hours. The curtains were open and the light was doing that particular thing it does in late October, low and gold and unhurried. I answered on the second ring. "It's moving," he said. No preamble. That was the thing I appreciated most about Philip. He treated my time like it was worth something. I set my mug down. "Tell me." The fraud investigation had produced a formal criminal case. 2 counts of document forgery, 1 count of financial fraud. Philip walked me through the charges in that clean, economical way he had. No performance, just the facts in the order they mattered. Damon's real estate license was suspended. Not under review anymore. Suspended, pending resolution of the criminal case. Whatever he'd been doing the past 6 months to keep his name visible in the industry, the LinkedIn posts, the motivational language about resilience and pivoting, none of it had held. You can manage a narrative right up until a licensing board files paperwork. After that, the narrative manages you. 2 of his business partners had ended their professional associations with him, publicly, not privately, not quietly over a handshake, publicly, the way people do when they want it on record that they saw the smoke before the fire reached them. I knew both those men. I had made small talk with their wives at 4 different holiday parties. They were not loyal men, which made them predictable, which made their departure unsurprising. The LLC was dissolved by court order, every asset distributed per the ruling. 3 years of carefully built misdirection, unwound in a single document. You know what I felt when Philip said that? Nothing dramatic, just a kind of settling, like a equation finally resolving. Then he told me about Nadine. She hadn't faced criminal charges. Her cooperation had been substantial enough, and early enough, that the investigators gave her room. She received a civil judgment instead, formal, documented, attached to her name in a way that any employer, any business partner, any future registered agent filing would find with a basic search. No prison, but a record that would follow her from room to room for the rest of her professional life. Her cooperation, Philip said, had been thorough, more thorough than anything his own filings had produced, if he was being honest. She gave investigators the full timeline of the LLC formation, who asked her to sign, when, what she was told, and what she understood it to mean. She confirmed the sequence of the refinancing documents. She confirmed the notarization office. She told them about conversations Damon had with her that made his knowledge of the forgeries explicit. Conversations she had been present for, and, until the certified letter arrived, had no legal reason to recount. The woman who showed up on Damon's arm in that backyard, the woman who described my fragility at his industry dinners, who wore a dress that cost more than my car payment and laughed at his jokes before he finished telling them. That woman sat across from investigators and, piece by piece, finished him. Not out of remorse. I want to be clear about that. She made a calculation, same as she always had. She just finally calculated correctly. I didn't say any of this to Philip. He knew it. We both did. "Where is he now?" I asked. Philip told me. An apartment complex on the east side of the city, a mid-range building on a street I recognized. I recognized it because Damon had once mentioned it. We'd been driving past it, and a colleague of his lived there, and Damon had said something dismissive about it. The kind of comment a man makes when he needs to establish distance between himself and a life he's afraid of sliding back into. My jaw didn't lock. My hands didn't go still. I just held the phone and absorbed it quietly. The social circle had dissolved the way those things do, not with a rupture, but with a gradual collective retreat. Fewer invitations, shorter replies. People find other people to have Sunday dinner with when the original arrangement stops being useful. I didn't blame them. I just noticed it, the way I noticed most things. We finished the call. I thanked Philip. He said, "Take care of yourself, Renee." I told him I would. I set the phone on the table and looked out the window. A few minutes later, it buzzed once. A text from a number I'd saved under no name, just the date I'd first heard her voice, pulled over on the side of a road, listening. "Thank you." 2 words. I looked at them for a moment. I typed back, "Take care of yourself." I meant it. Whatever she had done, whatever her part in all of it had been, she'd carried something heavy too. Not the same weight, but weight. I set the phone down, and then I felt it. Not grief, not triumph, not the hot tightness that had lived in my chest for the better part of 2 years. Something cleaner. Something that felt like a door closing softly in a house that had finally gone still. I had been carrying this for a long time. I was done now. 1 year after the hearing, I woke up before the alarm, which I could have turned off weeks ago but hadn't, out of some old habit of needing an exit ramp. The light came through the curtains the way I'd hoped it would when I chose them, that pale, clean yellow, the kind that doesn't ask anything of you. I lay there for a minute, just a minute. Nobody else's schedule in my head, no mental inventory of what Damon needed, what time he had a showing, whether I'd remembered to. Nothing. Just the light and the quiet and the particular luxury of a Sunday morning that belonged entirely to me. I got up and made coffee. I drank it while it was hot. Let me tell you something about that. 11 years of letting a cup go cold because something always needed doing first. 11 years of microwave reheating, of sipping lukewarm coffee standing over a sink, half present, half somewhere else. That first year of drinking it hot, sitting down, unhurried, window open, no one's name in my mouth, felt like a thing I had to relearn, like a muscle that had been held tight for so long it had forgotten what rest felt like. I wasn't performing contentment. I was just in it. The financial literacy workshop started on the 3rd Saturday of each month in the fellowship hall at my church. Folding chairs, folding tables, a whiteboard I bought myself and hauled in from my car. No budget to speak of, at least not at first. Just women who showed up because someone told someone else there was a woman named Renee who knew some things worth knowing. Most of them came in quiet, a little careful, the way you are when you've made financial decisions inside a relationship that didn't respect you, and you're not quite sure yet whether that's shameful or just survivable. I always started the same way. I told them what my mother told me, not as a speech, just as a fact. A woman who keeps records keeps her options. I wrote it on the whiteboard, every single time. They wrote it down, every single time. I remembered her hands on those receipts, pressing each one flat against the table with her thumb, smoothing the curl out of the paper before she slid it into the folder. She didn't have much, but she knew exactly what she had, and that was the whole point. I taught them how to read a joint account statement, how to identify an asset, what a registered agent is and why it matters. I taught them to photograph documents, to keep a notebook, to sign nothing they didn't understand, and to ask questions of someone who wasn't the person handing them the pen. One woman, 3 sessions in, asked me why I knew all this. I said, because I needed it. She nodded like that was exactly the right answer. Maybe it was. The birthday dinner was Kezia's idea, because everything fun in my life still traced back to Kezia having an idea. 4 of us at a restaurant she'd picked, a place downtown with small plates and low lighting, and a dessert menu that took itself very seriously. 2 of her friends I'd known in passing for years and had never quite gotten the chance to actually know, because there had always been somewhere else Damon needed me to be. We were 3 bites into an appetizer when someone said something. I couldn't even tell you what it was, and I laughed. Not the measured kind, not the composed, socially appropriate version I'd practiced for so many years. The real kind. The kind that made me set my fork down on the edge of my plate and press my fingers to my mouth like I needed to hold it in. Kezia watched me from across the table. She didn't say anything. She just smiled. The quiet kind. The kind that meant she saw it. You know what that was? Proof. Not for anyone else, just for me. Proof that whoever I was on the other side of all of this, she still had that in her. The laugh that took over. The moment you couldn't manage if you tried. I hadn't lost her. I'd just been keeping her somewhere safe. The notebook was in the bottom of the closet in my home office, underneath 2 years of tax returns and a manila folder I'd meant to file properly. I found it on a Sunday afternoon. Same Sunday, same slow light. I pulled it out and held it. 6 years of careful handwriting. Account numbers, dates, property addresses, transfer amounts. The record that became the foundation of everything Philip built the case on. I thought about my mother pressing receipts flat. I thought about the woman I had to become to protect the woman I already was. I held it for another moment. Then I set it in a box destined for the garage shelf, the one with the holiday decorations and the spare curtain rods and the things I don't need every day but haven't let go of yet. I closed the box. I went back inside. The door shut quietly behind me. The best revenge isn't what you do to them. It's who you become when they can no longer reach you. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!